I know, being the last speaker, that my time would be shortened, so I don't have a structured presentation because I thought we would actually be sitting in the panel and discussing. But I did upload a PowerPoint just to show you pictures which could illustrate a lot of participants said. I think Jyoti's paper, first of all, congratulations. I thought it was it had covered almost all aspects. I really don't think we could have added much more. And the summary of today that you just made was like really good bullet points. So, but what I think my contribution of today is how it's all very well for us to, especially among ourselves, be talking about principles, which in fact we all agree. And as one of the speakers of the other one says, it's more the behavior rather than the values that is a problem. And similarly, I think is a lot of what we're trying to do is not so much the lack of theoretical understanding of what we need to do, but simply the bad practice. So as now presented, I have had the privilege or the sufferance of dealing with World Heritage Cities for over 10 years during the time that I was at the World Heritage Center, first for Asia Pacific, then as Deputy Director. And I specifically concentrated on small and medium cities because, first of all, the big cities, the megapolis, the cultural-driven heritage, the cultural-driven urban planning was so difficult simply because of our lack of time and lack of resources. So we decided, in order to show pilot projects or successes, that it would be easier for us and more achievable to concentrate on small and medium cities. And but one thing is that while those of us living in Europe are completely used to fairly well-preserved urban conservation areas, one must never forget that in the vast majority of the countries in the world, there is no legal instrument nor the reality of urban conservation. I mean, it's still cultural conservation is limited to monuments and maybe a few vernacular buildings, and the concept of an urban district or conservation district is really still absent. Whereas what we're talking about here today, and in terms of the role of culture in the development process, is very much linked with the role of in terms of tangible heritage, the role of historic cities in the context of the bigger city. And what a bigger city, the greater city, can bring to its territory. So I have, throughout my career, been focusing on the role of culture and heritage as a kind of like a heart pumping into the rest of the body. How the core, acting as an urban centrality, brings that cultural element, dynamism, to the other part of the territory. And I won't get into it, but for those of us who've been following the World Heritage Convention, the notion of authenticity and integrity that is applied in the context of the World Heritage Convention, especially the notion of integrity, I think, as applied to historic cities, is something that really we need to be looking at, you know, because I don't think that we should just be accepting a Eurocentric approach towards a very pristine, well-defined, walled city or fortified city, because in many, many countries in Africa, as well as Latin America or Asia, that sanctity is gone already. But that doesn't mean we should therefore dump it and say, okay, let all the modern construction and go on and let everything heritage be destroyed. So the kind of things that I've been focusing on is really on trying to convince governments to make them understand the virtue of the urban conservation area, and which translates today as the historic urban landscape. You know, because it was excellent that UNESCO had finally got the historic urban landscape recommendation adopted, but many countries in Europe already have that for urban and territorial development, spatial development. And the case of Luang Prabang here sort of illustrates many of the points that have been raised. And in terms of so it's a very small town in Laos. Laos is one of the poorest countries in Asia, or in the world, and they set at the confluence of the Mekong and the Khan River. And so it was inscribed on the World Heritage List in 1995, and everybody was elated. They were so happy because they somehow didn't exist politically. state. They were always the poor brother of Thailand or the poor brother of China. So for them it was an affirmation. So as you see from the little map, we made sure that the border, the World Heritage Protected Border, went up to the, how do you say crête in English, the peak of the mountain, so that you don't see. So the outstanding universal value is the nature-culture link, including the 183 urban wetlands, the ponds. And the second World Heritage Value is a unique urban pattern, because there was a very organic village pattern upon which the colonial grid was imposed in the late 19th, early 20th century. And the third OUV was the fusion of the architecture between the traditional village vernacular architecture and the colonial architecture. So we immediately set up, thanks to the support that we got from a very active mayor of Chinon, of France, whose town Chinon was also on the confluence of two rivers, the Vienne and the Loire. So they said there were many similar things. So he said that he would be happy to have a decentralized cooperation with Luang Prabang. And fortunately, because of his very strong political influence, he was able to get a lot of money. I mean, we were the soldiers behind him, but we managed to get 5 EU projects and 3 AFD projects for a total of $30 million equivalent, 30 million euros equivalent, since 1996. So I have personally been involved in this project for over 18 years now. And this is what one realizes now in terms of local capacity building, how really, it's not even a 3-year frame. You need 10 years minimum to make sure that that what you were trying to do actually gets done. So what we were trying to do was to use the OUV, the Outstanding Universal Value, as a guideline for the urban and territorial development. Of course, bearing in mind the basic needs for all in terms of housing, urban mobility, access to economic opportunities, and especially in the context of Laos, a very strong to maintain the rural-urban linkages. So, as I said, one of the criteria is the wetlands. It's a source of livelihood. And there's a lot of the urban and peri-urban agriculture that needs to be preserved. And these wetlands are natural drainage systems. So in the monsoon season, the water drains through, and it's also a place for pisciculture, people. But again, we started, of course, because of the revolution and the war, the memory was lost as to how the town had expanded over the past. So we did quite a lot of research in terms of understanding the history of the evolution of the town. And as I said, the second criteria of the OUV was the village layout. So again, you can tell by looking at an aerial photo which house was built before the colonial period and whatnot. But the nice thing is that you have a grid, an urban grid, and inside the grid is a nice, very convivial village where the human relations are still very nice. So and I'll get to that later, but as part of our work, we are trying to now replicate the urban morphology of the World Heritage part of Luang Prabang in the new town extension. Of course, it can be wider streets and the blocks can be larger, but always to have the transversality of the view towards the river. Because in Luang Prabang, one of the most fantastic things about Luang Prabang is when you walk down the street, you turn right, you turn left, and you see the Mekong and the Khan River. And also in terms of the harmonious urban, the architecture between the Lao and the colonial style. The Lao people were very, very happy that it wasn't the colonial architecture that influenced them, that it was a Lao vernacular architecture that influenced the colonial buildings, which is natural because they had the know-how of the ventilation and the orientation of the wind. So obviously when the French people came, they replicated what they learned from the Lao traditional architecture. So we went down to the details of course, the inventory in terms of analyzing what kind of street patterns and what kind of, pavement there was, and made inventories of different flowers, and and then also very important to make a revival of the lime mortar. I think someone said in one of the sessions yesterday how important it is to have go back into understanding the logic of why certain materials were used. So we went through a very difficult process of going through. It took us like 5 years to come up with the safeguarding plan. But at the same time as we were doing the studies, as you can imagine, it takes a very long time. all sorts of things were happening. The urban wetlands, because of the World Heritage status, property speculation, people started to fill up the land, people wanted to make more and more hotels, and even, I must say, the Department of Finance, the government, wanted to fill up the land, and they built up, land. And the tragic thing is, a lot of the land filling, of the ecologically vital land filling, livelihood-wise vital urban wetlands, were being destroyed as a result of official development aid. I won't say who, but which bilateral agency, but in which regional bank, putting in millions of dollars, were actually destroying the heritage value, and even not only destroy the heritage value, but we're putting the livelihoods of people in danger by look at this rainstorm sewage, because it was easier for the contractor to use a crane. The ditches are 80 centimeters wide. Instead of using and giving employment to the laborers. So then, by the time, all of this, as I said, it's all done in the name of poverty alleviation, but they're creating worse situations because of unplanned or unreflected aid projects. This road upgrading, they make the new road 60 centimeters higher than the house. So every time it rains, which is, every year, the water floods into the house and it gets silted, mosquitoes, and, it's just terrible. So look at this is one of the sewages, and it's flat bottom, and all the mud gets stuck. So then we had to redesign a lot of the thing. So we made pointed sewages, which is easier for maintenance. So it's really necessary to understand how the societies function in the past. Because one great thing about vernacular architecture and organic town planning is that there was a logic, it's time-tested. People have tried all sorts of things, and then if they've arrived at a particular start, that this is we finally have got enough money to get rid of all those electricity, those are now going to be put underground. And then, of course, we spend a lot of time building toilets. People think it's very glorious that I worked at the World Heritage Center, in charge of World Heritage Cities, but most of the time I was into roads and sewages and public toilets, But this was a way of also trying to show it, and of course, renovation of public spaces. And as Jyoti and others have said, the public spaces are really important as a way of creating multiple functions. One of the big public spaces that we present, and this is as I talk, I'm showing you the work that, what happened? Is that we, by having multiple use public space, daytime market, vegetable market in the morning, becomes an evening restaurant area with people like hawkers, with chairs. And then, during the film festival, now Luangprabang has also come to understand the importance of, or they've got politically become open enough to allow foreign cinemas and things to come in. So there's there was an Asia Film Festival, and the big public space that we created, in the evening it becomes a cinema. And it's so nice, and all the wetlands that people were trying to destroy, we showed that it could be very beautiful. And now there's a big competition going on of people wanting to get the wetlands in order to put guest houses, because it's very pretty. So it's all a question of being able to show, okay, public space, outdoor, we have that. And we did all these design things in a very consultative way. And then this very, very nice covered market, was basically a small one, was a way of creating a public toilet. And so in order for people to take care of the public toilet, we put in a market next door, so whoever gets the concession of the market, of the shop, gets to... But then again, another ODA major project, they reinforced the riverbank without even doing a study on the erosion of the river to consolidate the riverbank, and then which brings in more and more cars. So you see, when cars should actually be not eliminated, but controlled. So somehow, the people making the decisions on what kind of overseas development aid should be going in are not being culturally sensitive. And it's not only that we are being, I mean the culture people are being ignored, but they're actually wasting public money by doing overseas development aid like that. So here, so this is just little pictures of how, but the important thing is that, again, if you don't give poor people land, they're just going to settle anywhere. So, and then they're going to destroy the landscape. So, and then by filling up the land, they fill up they get flood. We actually managed by doing the study of the larger area, the chemin de cohérence territoriale, the sort of the outside the core area. We shifted the direction of the airport runway, identified areas to enhance. So we used World Heritage as a way of expanding the heritage-based or culture-based into the territories outside. We finally, thanks to UNESCO's pressure of the so-called buffer zone, we got all the spot area, the outside the core area, the greater city area and beyond, protected as a buffer zone. And now we've shifted the bridge, the planned bridge from the south to the north. I negotiated for 5 years with the government of Laos to get a university installed to the north. Because we kept telling them the dangers of focusing the attention only on tourism. So we wanted a vibrant economy based on the knowledge society. So, okay, so the last slide is that how the World Heritage Core Area, with its buffer zone, covers the expansion of the city outwards, using the intelligence of the urban morphology of the old system to make a new town. And furthermore, using the UNESCO Man and Biosphere program to spread the benefits of heritage, in this case, natural heritage, to create a biosphere reserve. Laos, Luang. And in this area, the town of Luang Prabang, and we're trying to create secondary cities within a biosphere reserve. Okay, that's it. So again, to focus, and I think the only thing that was really missing in that paper about consideration was greater emphasis on the link between the historic city, the greater city, and the rest of the territory. So that's, and last but not least, this thanks to the Japanese Tokyo Institute of Technology, who were able to raise over the 7-year period something like $2.5 million equivalent to make a community multimedia center, an information center, where all the work that we've been doing for the last years have been digitized and made available online. In the last phase is that they're going to be using the mobile phone technology as a way of educating the public in terms of the heritage, and as well a tool that can be also useful for the tourists as well. So educate the citizens for a sustainable future is really, I think, the slogan that we all have to wear. Thank you.